Welcome to Book Nibbles. Big ideas, small bites. Money is one of the most universal aspects of modern life, yet it is also one of the most confusing and emotionally charged. People spend decades working for it, saving it, worrying about it, and dreaming of what it might bring. But few truly understand the forces that shape their financial choices. In Dollars and Cents, How We Misthink Money and How to Spend Smarter, behavioral economist Ariely and comedian-turned-writer Jeff Kreisler explore why people so often make irrational decisions about money and how understanding the psychology behind these choices can help them use their resources more wisely. Instead of treating money as a purely mathematical or logical tool, the authors invite us to see it as a mirror that reflects human quirks, biases, and emotions. They show how people distort the value of money, fall prey to hidden forces, and sometimes sabotage their long-term goals, not because they lack intelligence, but because the human mind was never designed to deal perfectly with something as abstract as modern finance. The authors begin by pointing out a simple truth. Money itself is not real in the way food, water, or shelter is real. It is an abstraction, a representation of value. And because of that abstraction, people constantly reinterpret what it means. Long ago, money was tied to tangible things like gold, silver, or cows. But today it is digits on a screen, swipes of a card, or taps on a phone. That abstraction creates a gap between the resource itself and the emotional weight people attach to it. For example, a $20 bill can buy dinner, a taxi ride, or go into savings, but once it is spent on one thing, it cannot be spent on another. Economists call this opportunity cost, but in practice, most people rarely stop to think about what they are giving up when they make a purchase. Instead, they evaluate each decision in isolation, forgetting the broader trade-offs. Ariely and Kreisler argue that this blindness to opportunity cost is one of the core mistakes people make. When someone buys a $5 coffee every morning, they might rationalize it as just $5, but over a year it adds up to over $1,800, enough for a vacation or a significant chunk of debt repayment. Yet people don't naturally think that way because money does not come with labels, reminding them of alternatives. This abstraction also explains why credit cards change behavior so dramatically. When paying with cash, the pain of parting with money is immediate and visible. Handing over a bill makes the cost concrete. With credit cards, the connection between the purchase and the payment is delayed and obscured, dulling that pain. Research shows that people spend more when using credit cards and cash, not because the items are suddenly more valuable, but because the psychological barrier is lower. A buffet experiment illustrated this well. Participants who paid for an all-you-can-eat buffet with cash ate less than those who paid with credit cards, suggesting that the immediacy of the pain of paying influenced their consumption. When the payment is invisible or postponed, people indulge more freely, often at their own expense. Beyond the mode of payment, the authors dive into mental accounting, a quirk of human psychology where people treat money differently depending on how it is categorized, even though dollars are fungible. For example, someone might scrimp and save on groceries, searching for the best deals, while at the same time splurging on a luxury watch or a fancy dinner out. Another might hesitate to dip into savings for necessary car repairs, but feel no guilt spending the same amount from a tax refund or gift. This happens because people assign money into different mental buckets: savings, vacation, windfall, necessities, and so on. A vivid example comes from people who receive bonuses at work. Instead of seeing the bonus as part of their regular income, they often label it as extra or free money, which leads to treating it less carefully. A $1,000 bonus might go straight into a lavish shopping spree, whereas if that same $1,000 came as part of a paycheck, it might go to bills or savings. The authors point out that while mental accounting helps people organize finances, it can also blind them to better uses of their money. Sales and discounts further exploit this mental accounting. Consider a jacket priced at $125 that has been marked down to $100. The buyer feels they saved $25, even though they still spent $100. The illusion of saving money distracts from the fact that the expense itself might have been unnecessary. People often buy items not because they need them, but because they cannot resist the feeling of getting a deal. This plays out dramatically during shopping events like Black Friday, where shoppers fight for discounted goods that they might not have considered worth purchasing at full price. The underlying psychological driver is the contrast effect. The difference between the original price and the discounted one feels like a gain, regardless of whether the purchase is rational. In one study, people were more willing to drive across town to save $10 on a $50 radio than to save $10 on a $1,000 television, even though the savings were identical. This demonstrates how people evaluate money in relative rather than absolute terms. Another irrational tendency is the way people anchor on arbitrary numbers. When making financial decisions, people look for reference points, even if those points are meaningless. In one experiment, researchers asked participants to write down the last 2 digits of their Social Security numbers and then bid on various items. Surprisingly, those with higher numbers bid significantly more, simply because their minds had been anchored by the digits they had just written. This shows how easily people's sense of value can be manipulated. Retailers exploit this with suggested retail prices, where an inflated original price makes the current price seem like a bargain. Similarly, restaurants place expensive dishes at the top of menus, not expecting them to be ordered, but to make the other items seem more reasonable in comparison. Anchors create a distorted sense of what is fair or normal, leading people to spend more than they otherwise might. The authors also explore how people are swayed by fairness and social context. A person might resist paying $5 for a bottle of water at a convenience store, but happily pay the same amount at a hotel minibar because the setting changes their expectations of fairness. This sensitivity to context can lead to inconsistent and illogical spending habits. In another example, people tipped more generously when a waiter gave them candy with the bill, not because the service had changed, but because the small gesture shifted the perceived fairness of the exchange. Money decisions are rarely just about numbers. They are about relationships, norms, and the stories people tell themselves about value. One of the more dangerous traps people fall into is the sunk cost fallacy, the tendency to continue investing in something simply because they have already invested in it. For instance, if someone buys an expensive ticket to a concert and later feels sick, they may still attend because they don't want to waste the money, even though the rational choice would be to rest at home. The money is already spent, but the emotional weight of the earlier decision pushes them into further discomfort. The same logic drives people to keep pouring money into failing projects, bad cars, or doomed businesses. Airlines, governments, and corporations often make this error on a massive scale, justifying new spending by the amount already invested, rather than evaluating future costs and benefits. Ariely and Kreisler emphasize that emotions deeply color money decisions. Pride, guilt, fear, and excitement all play roles. For example, people often give gifts that are inefficient from a purely economic standpoint. Buying a sweater for $100 when the recipient might not have chosen it themselves is less efficient than giving $100 in cash, but the emotional meaning of a gift outweighs the pure financial logic. Similarly, parents spend excessively on certain items for their children because the emotional satisfaction is so high, even if the costs strain their budget. The authors don't suggest eliminating emotion for money, but they encourage awareness of how feelings can cloud judgment. Another important theme is relativity. People judge value not on an absolute scale, but in relation to other options. A classic example involves choosing between 2 televisions, one 40-inch model for $500 and another 42-inch model for $550. Most people pick the slightly larger one because the small increase in price feels justified by the increase in size. Yet if the same $50 difference were presented in another context, say a $500 watch versus a $550 watch, the choice might not feel the same. People are inconsistent because they focus on differences rather than absolute costs. Marketers take advantage of this with decoy pricing, adding a third, unattractive option that makes one of the others look better. For example, a magazine subscription might offer an online version for $59, a print version for $125, or both for $125. Almost no one picks the print-only version, but its presence makes the combined option look like a bargain, steering choices in a predictable direction. The book also discusses self-control and procrastination, especially when it comes to saving and planning for the future. Many people know they should save for retirement, but they delay because the reward feels distant and abstract. Immediate pleasures, like dining out or buying gadgets, feel more concrete than the vague idea of financial security decades later. To overcome this, the authors suggest strategies like pre-commitment, automatically diverting part of each paycheck into savings before it can be spent. People are much better at resisting temptation when they never see the money in the first place. Similarly, tools like retirement accounts with penalties for early withdrawal exploit people's dislike of loss to keep them disciplined. Throughout the book, Ariely and Kreisler weave in stories and experiments that highlight these patterns. One striking experiment involved a coffee stand on a university campus that offered normal coffee for free but charged extra for premium add-ons like whipped cream, syrups, or fancy cups. Students, despite getting free coffee, still spent eagerly on the upgrades, demonstrating how context and presentation influence behavior. Another experiment showed that when people received beer samples with an unusual ingredient like balsamic vinegar, their enjoyment depended heavily on when they learned about the ingredient. If told beforehand, they disliked it. If told afterward, they often enjoyed it. This reveals how expectations shape perception, which applies directly to how people perceive the value of what they buy. In addition to diagnosing problems, the authors offer practical advice. One key suggestion is to bring more awareness to spending by asking reflective questions. Do I really need this? What else could I do with this money? Am I being influenced by a discount, an anchor, or a social norm? Another strategy is to reframe purchases in terms of time rather than money. If someone earns $20 per hour and considers buying a $200 item, thinking of it as 10 hours of work often brings more clarity than seeing it as just $200. This perspective can shift priorities and prevent frivolous spending. The authors also encourage people to simplify financial decisions by setting clear rules, such as always saving a set percentage of income or never buying something on impulse without waiting 24 hours. These rules help override the irrational tendencies that otherwise dominate. Yet the book is not just a manual for individual self-improvement. It also critiques the systems and industries that exploit human weaknesses. Credit card companies, retailers, casinos, and even restaurants design experiences that nudge people into spending more than they intend. The authors argue that understanding these forces is not only about protecting oneself, but also about questioning the fairness of a world where so many institutions profit from human irrationality. They stop short of calling for sweeping regulation, but they highlight the ethical tension between free markets and the manipulation of psychology. One of the most powerful points the book makes is that intelligence and education do not shield people from these mistakes. Even experts, economists, and financial professionals fall prey to the same biases, because these quirks are hardwired into human nature. The difference lies in awareness. Those who understand their tendencies can build systems to guard against them, while those who remain unaware are more vulnerable. Just as a Dieter removes tempting junk food from the house, a wise spender can design their environment to support better choices, setting up automatic bill payments, avoiding shopping when emotional, or disabling one-click purchases online. In the end, Ariely and Kreisler suggest that the goal is not to eliminate emotion for money, nor to strive for perfect rationality, but to use knowledge of human psychology to make slightly better decisions, again and again. Small improvements compound over time. Avoiding one unnecessary splurge, resisting one manipulative anchor, or redirecting one impulse by into savings may not seem life-changing, but repeated consistently, these actions build financial resilience. Money will always carry emotional weight, and people will always make some mistakes, but the path to smarter spending lies in embracing self-awareness and using strategies that align with human nature rather than fight against it. The book closes with a reminder that money is ultimately a tool, not an end in itself. People chase it thinking it will bring happiness, Yet happiness often comes more from how money is used than how much is accumulated. Spending on experiences, on relationships, and on security often yields more satisfaction than chasing status symbols or mindless consumption. The challenge is to see past the illusions and traps that surround money and to use it in ways that truly serve life's deeper goals. Ariely and Kreisler leave readers with both caution and optimism. Caution, because the forces that distort financial choices are everywhere. Optimism, because with greater awareness and deliberate strategies, anyone can learn to spend not just more rationally, but more meaningfully. And that's it. Dollars and Cents: How We Misthink Money and How to Spend Smarter by Dan Ariely and Jeff Kreisler. Thanks for listening to Book Nibbles. If you enjoyed this bite-sized book, don't forget to subscribe for more quick, insightful summaries. See you in the next nibble.